Like and subscribe right now. Or else this will be in your bed tonight. According to them, at one point there was a cockpit fire, because after a flight the pilots would shove their flight plan into a gap in the instrument panel on their plane. Engineers have read it. What's something that's designed into a machine, solely because of the stupidity of human beings? Ever wonder why the vast majority of mix packages require 3 ingredients? And why is it always water, eggs, and oil? Well, it turns out humans are obsessed with the number 3. Studies show that the 3 ingredients are the right mix of convenience and homemade feel. As for water, eggs, and oil, they are found to be the most likely ingredients you already have at your house. If someone who makes Coke freestyle machines is reading this, you haven't worked hard enough. You'd be amazed at how many people cannot figure out how to get soda out of this giant glorified printer. After waiting 2 to 3 minutes for some kid to go through 10 layers of menus to figure out what super ultimate flavor he's going to have, I now have to share a touch screen that everyone in the restaurant has touched for the last 8 hours, just for my water to come out with a pink tint. Awesome. I used to work in a building where the air ducts and air diffusers were originally designed to be almost completely silent. Well, apparently when the building opened, a lot of tenants complained that the air wasn't working. While it was working fine, they couldn't hear it and assumed it wasn't running. The building ended up putting these sound boxes in the ceiling near every diffuser to simulate the sound of air blowing. The reason an ATM gives you your card back before your cash is because you just grab the cash and forget your card. I was in a foreign country where the ATM gave you your cash before your card, and walked away without my debit card. In my defense, I had been drinking a bit that night. But apparently if you leave your card in the machine it will get sucked in and stored internally. Thankfully I was able to get it back when the bank opened the next day. But yeah, people like me are the reason for that. It's not a machine, but the progress bars in TurboTax are a sham. Computers are fast, and the calculations aren't that hard. Whenever it says calculating, that's just to make the humans feel like they got their money's worth. To be fair, many websites and video games do this. It's part of the user experience. It would be somewhat disconcerting if every action taken resulted in immediate changes on the screen, especially in video games. Humans usually prefer some sort of transition that takes a finite amount of time and indicates their input has been acknowledged and processed. This is why most cloud-centered tools, Google Docs, email, etc., have some kind of icon or continuous feedback that shows your changes have been saved. It also allows for some cover if there is some temporary delay due to lag, overloaded servers, etc. On the human side, there is also some learned behavior from using glitchy, imperfect programs that fail or freeze without warning. A lack of significant feedback is often a symptom that something went wrong, or else that the application has failed silently in the background. I'm sure everyone has had a blood-boiling experience of clicking on something multiple times, with zero feedback that anything is happening. If you work in an office, chances are you have an IP desk phone, the ones that use a network cable. Now if you pick it up you will hear a dial tone or some other white noise. That's completely artificial, it's just an audio file the phone goes out of its way to play for you. Why? Normally the phones are silent, but the first company that popularized them, I think it was Cisco, kept getting complaints that the phones were broken because there was no dial tone. So they just slapped some white noise on the phones, and people stopped complaining. Also Google is known for doing this too. When Google was being developed it was a very minimalist design. Being free of flashy pop-ups and distracting animations. The clean and fresh look, also the programmers didn't know CSS too well. During the test phase people would just stare at the screen and not use the site. When asked why, they replied, "I don't think it's finished loading." So the devs added a big colorful Google. And some copyright info. Power paper cutters require that the human operator simultaneously push 2 buttons. This is to prevent the accidental amputation of the operator's hand. A lot of large-scale manufacturing companies use this 2-button system for running an operation on a machine. It is mainly for safety concerns. Another cool way they have idiot-proof machines is adding a safety curtain. Basically it's an infrared sensor that will make the machine shut off when something breaks its plane, hands, fingers, their head. They want people to leave work with the same amount of fingers as they showed up with. Putting barriers at railroad crossings that block the whole road and not just the directional lane, because even with lights flashing and barriers down people still think they can drive around the gates and beat the train. I've been on scene for some pretty nasty cleanups because people didn't want to wait an extra 5 minutes for a train to pass. My sister is also a paramedic. She once got to a black, fried, train station worker. Because they were too lazy to go down the long way to their rest place when having lunch, instead they used to use some ladder to just go over a train. Well, one day, there was too much air humidity and thus the high voltage cable above the train decided, let's shoot a lightning 1 meter into that guy. She said the guy was instantly dead and wasn't even really discernible to be human anymore. When I was in college we had a cold roll mill. Basically 2 rollers designed to roll metal thin. Incredibly powerful. During the training it was explained the position of the emergency stop button was such that if you got your hand caught in it your head would hit the E-stop before it pulled you in completely and rolled you down to about 1/8 of an inch thick. Sure, your arm would be 1/8 of an inch thick, but at least it's just that. Storytime, kids. When I was 18, I was operating a large roll forming machine and had my gloved hand pulled into said machine. I was feeding metal into the machine and my glove caught on the metal. The controls for the machine were on the left end, which as I discovered was in just the right place for me to slam my body into the control box, hitting the large red, protruding more than any other thing on the box, button. The machine stopped before reaching my elbow. This simple design feature saved, I believe, my arm. As it is, I have all my fingers, and full strength and mobility. Only some rather large scars remain as a testament to the event. Working in the passenger rail industry has made me more of a misanthrope than I already was. My standard design guide for anything accessible by passengers and drivers, yes, they're just as bad. If they can't steal it, they'll break it. If they can't break it, they'll hurt themselves with it. Those little hammers for breaking the emergency glass are held there with a wire so you can't steal them. The wire is that short so you can't use it as a weapon. That ride on the train you're getting is likely 80% subsidized by taxes. That means you're literally paying less than a quarter what it actually costs to move your ass around. That tempered glass windscreen you just scratched your initials into is now a safety hazard and will cost a couple $1,000s to replace. Stuffing paper into the floor heater grate creates a fire hazard. Show some respect, and please refrain from vandalizing and damaging crap, mostly paid for by people who don't ride the train just because you're bored or pissed off at the world. I did some work for the pilot training department, ground school, of a major US airline based in Atlanta. They told us on the equipment we were providing to be sure that the buttons couldn't be removed and there weren't any gaps. Because the pilots, who at this level were making probably 100 grand a year in the early 90s, would steal the buttons and fill any gaps with pieces of paper they didn't need. According to them, at one point there was a cockpit fire because after a flight the pilots would shove their flight plan into a gap in the instrument panel on their plane. Moral is everyone, not just the general public, is awful. Edit, to be clear, the story on the flight plans was that after the flight, to dispose of their paper flight plan, they'd just shove it into a crack in the instrument panel and let it drop in and disappear. They weren't lacking a clipboard, they were lacking a garbage can. Like and subscribe for more r/Ask Reddit videos.